So my name is Edna Barrett, and I'm a pediatric physical therapist, and I have been working for 4 years. I work for an outpatient clinic that is connected to a children's hospital. So I go to work from 8 to 4:30, so a typical 8-hour day. But in that 8-hour day, I am seeing patients every 30 minutes. However, I am given time to document on my patients, which is 2 hours of my day. So I'll typically see uh, four patients in a row, then I'll have a 30-minute break so I can catch up on documentation, and then I'll see another four patients again, and then I'll take another break. So it's pretty much four off, four on, and I'm treating children ages 0 to 21 in a variety of gross motor skills or developmental delays, musculoskeletal impairments, neurological diseases. So helping them move better. So think about what you would do in your daily life, like anything that you may be doing. So walking, being able to reach for something, the ability for your feet to move within the available range. So you can, if you're a child, hop, skip, jump. We always try to work towards participation. So a child's major participation in the world is through play or being a little student if they're school age. So I'm just helping them be able to physically move better and do everything that other children their age might be doing. Yeah, so there's actually quite a bit of education required for physical therapy. You obviously have to graduate high school. You do have to go through a 4-year university college and come out with a bachelor's degree that is required now. You also have to take a special test called the GRE, which stands for, I'm forgetting right now. Sorry. Yeah. You know what? I actually did look up what it takes now to get into school. I did not actually have to take the GRE. It wasn't required when I got into PT school, but it is now. So you have to take the GRE and then you do 3 years of physical therapy school. If you would like to get into the field of physical therapy a little bit quicker than that, you do have the option straight out of high school, take a few of your general ed courses in college, and you can jump into a physical therapy assistant program, which is usually just under 2 years, except that it's an associate's degree. Whereas for DPT, you had to go through a full bachelor's in something else, and then you went to 3 years of PT school. So you're doing 7 years after high school. Whereas I think for PTA, if you were really on top of things, you could potentially be done within 2 to 3 years after high school. Yeah, so I was always attracted to the healthcare field, and you typically only ever hear about medicine or dentistry. Sometimes you might hear about pharmacy. You don't tend to hear too much about the allied health careers, which are a whole other branch, physical therapy included. This is also like your respiratory techs, your speech language pathologists, occupational therapists. But I was attracted to the physical therapy branch because I wanted something that really put me in a position where I was actively working one-on-one with patients and had a continuity of care. So when I am working with a patient, I am seeing them either multiple times a week or on a weekly basis for a length of time. And so in my field in pediatrics, I usually tend to treat children for a minimum of 3 months, and I'm seeing them at least once a week, sometimes twice a week. So I really get to bond with the child, with the family, and I really kind of get to see the fruits of my labor over time and really get to invest myself in their progress. So I was very attracted to the idea of molding and shaping and working with others and really getting to spend that time and see the differences I'm making in kind of a very natural, holistic way. Because we're working on, balance and walking and strengthening, and it's pretty amazing because it's all that I'm doing for my own brain. Like, it's amazing. Yeah, so I was very lucky to have personal friends who are already physical therapists. But in general, any program in the entire United States for physical therapy, or even if you were looking at a physical therapy assistant route, you are required to do observation hours. Most PT clinics, whether they're associated with a hospital or they're private practice, just located somewhere regionally, and most places are going to have opportunities for shadowing or even volunteering. Volunteering in a PT clinic pretty much looks like cleaning equipment for the PT, so we can kind of stay hands-on with the patients. but I did do a bit of that at first. So I went and shadowed at clinics and different kinds of clinics. PT is very broad. It's not just the sports and the broken legs or the knee replacements. It's way beyond that. So I made sure to shadow at a few different places so I could see if this might be something I like. Because there are so many branches of PT, you may not necessarily like one, but you may fall in love with another. So shadowing is the best way because you get to see it, and then you're already kind of networking and building those connections with the physical therapist there in that specific location, and they might be able to recommend some other places you can go with people they know. So your network grows larger just by just showing up and saying, hey, is there an opportunity for me to just shadow in the clinic or even volunteer and clean so I can get some exposure to the field? And yeah, you just build your network pretty rapidly. And most PTs are people. So they're happy to have excited people coming in and learning about what we do. Physical therapy requires a lot of collaboration, either between yourself and other people in physical therapy, being physical therapists or even PTAs. But also, if you happen to be lucky enough to be at a facility that has an interdisciplinary team, meaning you have those other branches of rehab, then you all work together because we like to look at the person as a whole unit. It goes back to that participation that I was talking about. My component might be the musculoskeletal part. So I'm really working on muscles and strengthening and balance in their body. But what could be some of the things that are limiting my progress might be in the realm of speech or in occupational therapy. So I end up talking a lot with them to try to strategize and see what tips or advice they can give so that I can make my sessions much more effective. If I were at a place that didn't have those branches, even still collaborating with other PTs, more eyes on the same patient is essential for making sure you're not missing anything. Because when it comes to like improving someone's life or helping them move, it can come to the smallest little details on just one little small impairment might be the whole reason why they're falling every other day, or they just can't, maneuver around obstacles when they're out and about. And this could be for anyone, a child to, an elderly person. Sometimes it's something very small and maybe you're missing it. But if someone else is around, yeah, you work a lot with other people. It's a people's job. There is certainly desk time because we have to do documentation, but that's just a small portion of it. Absolutely. So when I first went into school, I had only held one baby in my entire life, and it had happened like 2 months before I started my program. So I was very gung ho that I was going to work in geriatrics. I wanted to work with the elderly, particularly the ones who had progressive diseases like Parkinson's disease and all those things. But then I discovered pediatrics, and I realized that there were so many pros or advantages, you could say, to working with the younger population. 0 to 21 is what pediatrics is classified as. First of all, I always say there's the most redeeming factors in pediatrics because you are working with very cute patients, right? They're adorable, most of them, right? Say they're having a bad day and they're kind of acting a little bit bratty. Okay, well, then you know that you're helping to make their families' lives better. You're helping ease some type of burden that might be there. So even if the kid is not doing it for you that day, you're helping the family. And then say both the child's kind of being bratty and the parent is not appreciative of what you're doing. At the end of the day, you're helping to improve the life of a child. And so that still kind of gives you fulfillment that something you're doing is helping them have a better life overall, whether or not they recognize it or appreciate it. The bulk of who I see are going to be 3 years old and down. So I may get those, kind of grumpy 3-year-olds, those terrible twos. I get a lot of those, and I still get a lot of satisfaction, even when not everything else is going so well, knowing that, okay, because I'm working so hard on this child may be able to join the soccer team someday, or this child will be able to attend school along with their peers and have lunch in the cafeteria because I helped them learn how to go up steps. So I feel like there's a lot of redeeming factors in pediatrics because you're changing a life. There's also the fact that kids are not good like reporters, they're not good historians. So it kind of makes your job a little bit more detective like. You have to really look at what's going on, really assess them, put all the pieces together. They're like these little tiny riddles and they cannot help you. There's no clues really. So you're really using all your brain. I always say all cylinders are firing when I am working in pediatrics because I have to figure it all out on my own. And it's sometimes trial and error, but that's kind of part of the fun, testing things out. And the fact that I get to work with toys all day and make it fun. It gets to be games. We take it beyond just the typical, let's just get you stronger on this muscle. Let's do 20 reps of the same activity. It's way more interesting and challenging. I don't know. I love the challenge of pediatrics. So I think there's so many pros for working in peds. The most important thing is you want to be a good listener. You have to have your ear to the ground on what's going on amongst the people who you're working with. So in physical therapy, there tends to always be a lead or a senior therapist for every area or every different department. So you're going to have other physical therapists who are just as educated as you are, maybe don't have as many years of experience, or maybe some of them might even have more than you, and for whatever reason you were elevated to a senior most position. Either way, you're all technically on the same level. There's no academic difference, and there's no necessarily differences in your job duties. So for whatever reason, you were chosen to lead or manage over others. And that's where I say it's really important to listen, because on a fundamental level, you're all doing the same job essentially with patients. And so when you have complaints or concerns, you want to listen versus react, because their point of view is probably in many ways kind of similar to whatever your concerns could potentially be if you were maybe in their position. The other thing I would always say too is you don't also want to be seen as being passive. You do need to have some type of reaction when someone comes to you with a concern. You don't want it to be where someone comes to you and says, this is going on, I'm concerned, and you don't do anything with that. You either need to respond to why you are not going to take an action on it, or you need to take an action on something. I think leadership falls a lot, or fails, you could say, when you go to, say, your boss or whoever your higher ups are with a complaint and then nothing happens. I feel like that's far worse than going to them with some type of complaint and then maybe it doesn't necessarily go your way, but they sit down and explain to you the decision they made, and you understand that they made a decision versus just kind of ignoring. So this is where I mean listening and taking it in, but also being sort of decisive, whether or not that means you are going to do something or whether or not you're not going to do something. Nobody likes to feel like your boss just doesn't do anything or is disconnected, or they're, too nice, so they don't want to do anything. I mean, you got to stand for something. And so you got to take a position on things. I think that's really important. And also being consistent. If you are and this sometimes can be challenging because obviously, like I said, in PT, you're all kind of on the same level when it comes to your patient care and your patient duties, but also recognizing that while you are one of them, if you have been given special responsibilities, that you always kind of respect your position as well. Otherwise, no one else is going to respect it. So it's in PT that gets very tricky because we are very people oriented, and it's a very active career. I'm rarely sitting, I'm always up on my feet. And so it tends to be the people who have energy and who love to talk to people, because like in my field, I'm only seeing patients for 30 minutes, but it's pretty frequent that you'll see clinics that see about 45 minutes or even up to an hour with the same patient. So we like to chat, we like to talk, and especially amongst each other. So yeah, those boundaries between colleagues, but yet maybe I'm a little bit more elevated or I have a senior position. You gotta respect the boundaries, and that comes from the leader as well. Sure. Okay, so going back to one of my first jobs, which was scooping ice cream at a very well-known ice cream franchise that makes their employees sing for tips and cheer and chant. I think some of those skills, honestly, because you do have to kind of put yourself out there. I feel like in physical therapy, because it's one of the lesser known branches, and it is tied to something most people don't like to do, which is exercise or do work that is hard. You kind of have to be your own cheerleader, and you have to be very enthusiastic because you need the patient to buy into what you're doing. You are making them do it's not fun. It's not just like you going to the gym for a workout. It is, you're going for something that you are naturally not good at. And that can be very challenging for a child, let alone an adult, of course. So you kind of have to be cheery. You have to be positive. You got to get them to believe in what you're doing. So I very much remember being very embarrassed all the time whenever I had to sing for tips at that ice cream place. But I think it taught me to, like, you just deal with it, just put yourself out there and just do it. It's just it's part of the job. And not to say that it's not sincere when we're doing it as physical therapists, it's a part of our job. And naturally, if you are at all interested in a career in physical therapy, this may be a skill that is one of your talents as well. But you really will have to give into that natural cheerleader, that natural positivity, getting people to buy what you're selling. I mean, obviously, based on how much I've said it, you have to be able to work with others. You cannot be a solitary person. It is not the career for you. But beyond that, probably one that would be less obvious would be time management skills. You have to have tremendous amount of time management because you are in a field that, for the most part, is going to be hourly. So you have to get your work done in a certain amount of time, and we are on a schedule. It is very similar to other medical professions where you are on a time schedule and there is not very much wiggle room. If I am working 30 minutes with one patient, I should not be late to the next one because they only have 30 minutes because the next person is coming. So those time management skills are going to be critical, whether that means how you plan out your session and how you clean up and set up for the next one, to even my documentation. So I see 4 patients in a row and then I get 30 minutes to document. 30 minutes is a long time, but I am documenting on 4 different patients and having to remember everything I did. So I have to be timely so that at the end of the day, I'm not there a million hours of overtime. I can go home at an appropriate time and recharge so that I can do it well again the next day. So time management and people skills, I would say. Obviously, compassion is going to be huge because for a lot of patients, it will be one of the hardest things to come to you. And specifically in pediatrics, we always tell our new employees or anyone who asks us about physical therapy that, especially for a child, so for a child and their family to come to peds, sometimes that walk from the waiting room to my gym with me is one of the hardest moments of that family's life if they are dealing with a devastating diagnosis that now they realize this is the beginning of a lifetime of recuperating and healing and learning to do basic things that maybe children with typical development are easily able to do. So having compassion for the fact that your patients aren't necessarily always doing this for wellness. They're doing this because their life circumstances have forced them to be there, and not that they don't want to be, but that's the path that they were given. That was the burden they would have to carry, is that their life is not as simple or their health is not as typical as others. So sometimes it's really hard to find yourself in physical therapy. So you have to have compassion for the fact that even if they are grumpy, and this is even if they're a child or an older patient, an adult patient, it's a hard thing to have to go to physical therapy. It means something is not right. And so understanding their lives are much more challenging. The fact that I can come in and help them and work with them and help make things better for them, I'm physically capable of doing that. They are not. And so that is something to be very cognizant of, is your place in that spectrum of dealing with people who are going through hard things. So you tend to use all kinds of equipment. So in pediatrics, a lot of my equipment are toys, and I use toys. I truly will go, as part of my job at least, I get to go on Amazon and search for the latest and the greatest, most popular toys on Amazon. But I'm looking at them through the perspective of how can I use this toy for therapy. So I'm using all kinds of light up toys, singing toys, stationary toys. Those tend to be my tools. General physical therapy tools could be anything from, well, TheraBands, those nice stretchy exercise bands, adjustable benches. We have mat tables. I think like kind of like a massage table. People are pretty used to seeing those around. Swiss balls or therapeutic balls, the big ones, exercise balls. We have a set of stairs in the clinic. We do have bikes and kind of some weight machines, leg press. We have all those things, but we utilize like parallel bars. So there is a lot of equipment that you could potentially use in physical therapy, but specifically in pediatrics, toys. Those are my biggest tools, and learning to be creative with toys so that you can get the child to perform an activity in the way you want. That's a skill that you just need experience. You're not going to know that one on day one. You just have to practice and do it. I have only traveled a few times, and that was in relation to research, where I had to go to research training. So, in typically, Most PT jobs are not going to have any travel. You'll always be in your clinic, but there is a branch of physical therapy where you can become a travel physical therapist and you are constantly traveling. But that is more of a contract situation. So if you are deciding to pursue that avenue of physical therapy, and that can be anything. So you could be a pediatric to an adult to geriatric therapist, where you sign up with a company and you'll say, I want to try out Tennessee next. And they will find you a job in Tennessee for however long you want. I think the minimum is like 3 weeks, but it could be 3 weeks to 3 months to a year. And then you can just pick up and say, now I want to go to Missouri, and they will find you a job there. So that is an area of physical therapy where you could be a traveling PT and work at tons of clinics, tons of hospitals, see the world. I actually currently have a friend who right now is in Hawaii and another one who's in Alaska. So you can do it anywhere you want. But me and my job, I travel very little. Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, health is always going to be a major sector of the workforce. Unfortunately, children will always be born with disabilities. Hopefully not. Maybe modern medicine someday will cure that. But until the day that happens, which still seems very far off in the future, you will have a job if you want to be a pediatric physical therapist. If you wanted to be an adult therapist, people are still going to have knee replacements, hip replacements. They're going to break bones. Our job is very much, you know, it's a very safe job because people get injured, unfortunately. And until the day we can make sure nobody gets injured or no one ever gets any type of diseases, we'll have a job. So it's a very secure position to have. You will always have patients. It varies a lot across the United States. So here I am in Southern California. This isn't even right. It's one of the higher paid states, but it's not, top five. I believe it's in the top 10. Different places will, PT tends to float where it's the opposite of wherever it's super nice. So for instance, everybody wants to move to Colorado. It's one of the lowest paying states for physical therapy. Nobody maybe wants to move to New Jersey. It is the number one in the country for physical therapy. So it's kind of one of those things. Nevada is incredibly hot. That's also super high. I believe that was like number 2 or 3. So California's up in the top 10. Not that people don't want to live here, but California also is kind of its own thing. But any place that is super popular is usually not going to pay very well. So that's something to kind of take into account. The other thing is different branches of PT are going to pay differently. So if you work like that travel position I was talking about, you could be making anywhere in the $50 to $60 an hour range for traveling. And it's kind of fun and exciting. So that kind of almost and they pay that because it's a premium for the fact that you jump into a new position, you've got to learn it quick, and then you work for however much time it is, and then you pick up and go somewhere else. So it's almost an incentive, even though that may be a lifestyle you choose, it's almost an incentive for how versatile you are, you get paid more. Same for the physical therapists who go to people's homes. So that's another branch of physical therapy is home health, where you're not treating a clinic, you're actually treating a patient in their home. Those will pay in the $50 to $60 per hour range because you are going out of your way, you travel to their home, you're providing an in-house service. For someone like me who is working in a hospital attached clinic, and I would say for the vast majority of outpatient clinics or private clinics in Southern California at least, you can expect to be paid in the high 30s starting out, like zero experience, high 30s an hour. And then you move up every year as increases occur. I'd say across the board, you're making a pretty decent living. No, you are not going to be traveling every other weekend, but you certainly can pay for vacations. You can, buy yourself a new car. It's a comfortable living for sure. But it is not a jet setting lifestyle. It is what they call the lowest paid doctorate in the nation, at least in the United States. So even though you are a doctoral level practitioner, you are the lowest paid in the branch. I would say most physical therapists can expect to make about 70 to maybe 80,000 a year. So you can be comfortable. I mean, that's a comfortable living for a lot of people. But no, you're not buying 12 houses. You'll probably buy your home. You can own your home, and you can travel, but not every other weekend. I mean, I think most people tend to think of physical therapists as like sporty people. I am the complete opposite of that. I think most people tend to equate physical therapy with a personal trainer. And notice they have the same initials, PTs. You tend to think like that's an exercise person, that's an exercise person. This one just happens to work at a hospital. That's not necessarily a bad stigma, but it does sometimes interfere with a patient's understanding of what you're there to do. It means they may have preconceived notions of what's about to happen. And then when you offer your skill set and it's slightly different than their expectations, certainly that can cause some concerns or confusion, and it just doesn't make it very easily. Also, PTs tend to get the bad rep of their patients are always in pain, because those who do understand the nature of the job realize that we are making you work usually in the hardest positions available to you. And that's not necessarily because we're trying to pick on you and make it hard. We're not boot camp. That's not what it is. When you come to physical therapy, we're there to help you be better, help you move better. So in my case with children, you probably imagine I'm making kids scream all day long, or you may think I'm just playing with kids all day long, which certainly a lot of what I do is play, but it's therapeutic. So if I have a child who, for whatever reason, doesn't want to crawl like on their hands and knees, they just don't want to do it, they can't do it, I have to figure out, why are they not doing it? Is it because certain muscle groups are tight? Is it because certain muscle groups are weak? Are they compensating for some sort of physical deformity that is happening? And if that's the case, I have to lean into it and make it stronger so they can do those things. So that does result in tears. There was a short time in my life where I worked with adults, specifically orthopedic patients, and I was doing a lot of knee replacements and a lot of hip replacements. And I had grown men crying on the table because I had to get in there and help them improve their movement so they could return to walking, so they could return to work if they wanted, or return to their daily walking their dog or participating in family activities. It is a hard job because usually you are the one making people do something they don't want to do. And the people who recognize that will also tend to look at it as, you just hurt people. They don't see the full benefit of what we're doing, which is it hurts sometimes. And I like to use the word sore. It's usually that it's just making them really sore, because we're leaning into the things that they need. And I promise if people stick it out with us, it will get better, and it makes everything so much easier. It is always the best when I have a child who has cried at every session for like a month straight, and then finally it all kind of starts to come together. And now for that child who didn't want to crawl, crawling is their favorite thing in the world. It's like the most amazing thing. They're now free. They can play with their siblings and they love it. Mom's like, I can't get them to stop crawling. So it all kind of comes to fruition at the end of, this is what we were working for. Like, see, this is why we were making you cry the whole time. Like, I wanted you to learn this. So anyways, kids can't give you the feedback that they recognize that, but in their joy and in their happiness, well, then like, okay, I did it. That all that crying was for something. So anyways, I would just say the stigmas tend to be like the sports thing, or that we're just there to like exercise. Like, I want to come in and work on my glutes, and that's not what we do. So I think they think it's maybe like the gym, but covered under health insurance, and that's not it. So you get to be active all day. So I love that I'm not sitting. I love that I'm on my feet all day. Even at the end of the day, when I am feeling lazy and I don't want to exercise, I feel like I did that all day long, which is great. I think that's a super advantage. It's just you're a very mobile career. It feels good to be up and moving all the time. But naturally, maybe that might have been the draw for me to PT, is that I'm helping other people do that as well. I like that continuity of care. I like that in the healthcare spectrum, I'm seeing my patients very regularly and spending a lot of one-on-one time. I really get to know them. I get invited to birthday parties. I get, Christmas cards. I get it all. So I really love that connection I get to make, which is pretty unique in healthcare. You may see for children, you may see your pediatrician for your appointments and maybe once yearly, but you don't necessarily get that one-on-one bond. Maybe if you're in a smaller town situation, or maybe it's a special situation, you may, but in physical therapy, for the most part, that's guaranteed, which I think is incredible. I'm going to get to know all my patients, even the ones who may not like me. I'm going to get to know them. We're going to get to spend time together. I'll get to hear their life story, be a part of it, which is super fun. What I also really liked too was, for healthcare, like I referenced back, it is in hourly position. And there is some type of freedom, I think, to being in hourly position, because once I clock out, I can, detach from the workplace. And I do feel there is a huge importance to that work-life balance. Not to say that I don't think about my patients when I'm at home. I certainly, if I go to like Target or Costco and I see a toy, I'll sometimes think to myself like, "Ooh, keep that in mind. That'd be great for the gym at work." Or maybe sometimes I'll like have dreams about like, "Oh, I should try this idea with that patient." I certainly still think about my patients a little bit, but I can totally disconnect. Like once I clock out, I can clock out. I can focus on my family. I can focus on my friends, the things that I enjoy and like. And there is kind of a nice sense of, it's I'm not a salaried position, so nobody owns me. And I hate saying that because a salaried person isn't owned necessarily, but certainly their responsibility is going to be a little bit different than the person who's on an hourly schedule. And it's, when they're on the clock, yes, we focus on work, but then when we're off the clock, you don't have to. And I think there's something really nice about that for work-life balance. And to add on to that, a PT's job is very flexible. You can go into physical therapy, and like I said, there was a short stint where I did work in adult orthopedics, and I had always wanted to kind of go into pediatrics after school. So that was kind of thing. In school, I discovered pediatrics. And then once the right peds job popped up, I was able to pick up and move. Other branches of healthcare, you're very pigeonholed, where you specialize and that's where you stay. You can't just suddenly decide 10 years down the line, hey, I've never worked with athletes, I want to do that. In a month, in a year, in a decade, if I chose to jump back into geriatrics or work with that population I described, or maybe I want to work in an NICU or in an ICU unit of a hospital, I can just do that. There is a lot of flexibility, which is amazing. So I liked that it was kind of a job with a lot of potential and a lot of possibilities. So that's definitely a pro. If you like healthcare, if you like people, but you still kind of want to have flexibility in your life, it's a really good branch for that. And there's a lot of schedules to meet your needs. So some PTs work like half days, full days. It's all possible. It's all possible, which is really awesome. The biggest negative that I would personally say is just that physical therapy as a field, and most of allied health still isn't, it's part of preventative health care. And preventative in the sense of, I did talk a little bit about how we rehab people who have injuries or maybe they're born with disabilities, but in general, it's still preventative. What we're hoping to do is prevent surgeries or worse secondary complications or things of that nature. In general, in the whole healthcare spectrum, preventative care is still not the focus. We're slowly moving in that direction, but it's not quite there where the rehab professions, so PT, OT, speech, all those allied healthcare professions I kind of mentioned, we're still not necessarily getting the respect that maybe some of the other positions may have. We love our doctors, we love our nurses, we love, everybody, the big ones, right? We know what they do, their jobs are easy to describe, and we know how important they are in the full spectrum of health in, anywhere, not just in the US, anywhere, right? But PT is still kind of that unknown component, and it's such a big, crucial part. I think it can make such a difference for anyone to go through PT. So I think that's kind of the hardest one, is sometimes to convince your fellow healthcare professionals of why your job's important. And it's not necessarily because, they don't, sometimes it's because they don't know enough about your job, but sometimes it's just they don't necessarily value it. And I don't feel like insurance companies value physical therapy as much as they should, but it does seem like we're moving in that direction. So hopefully maybe someday it will be, and I'm mostly referencing reimbursement, just how much an insurance company is willing to pay for my services. And this is not just how much I'm going to get paid. It's literally, when you look at the spectrum of healthcare, an insurance company decides what everything is worth. This is how much we're willing to pay for this service because we value it more. And physical therapy's on the low end, and it does make it difficult if you wanted to be your own business owner. If you wanted to open up your own practice, it does make it difficult because you're not going to get the reimbursement that, say, a dentist is going to make when they open up their clinic. Insurance thinks, yeah, let's pay them a lot because oral health is so important. Well, physical therapy is also really important. It's going to prevent those major surgeries down the line, especially in children who have some of these diseases like cerebral palsy, where their muscles are spasming or doing crazy things in their bodies that could prevent further surgeries down the line, or broken bones or something. Those are going to cost way more than just some therapy sessions who can start, helping to build that strength to prevent those injuries. So I would say, to me, the biggest con is just that respect level and not that understanding of preventative care is so important. Like, let's not pay for surgeries. Let's pay for preventative care. Not that there's anything wrong with surgeries. Obviously, some surgeries are not, some surgeries are inevitable, but I really wish we had more of a focus towards preventative care in general. I feel like I didn't know PTs were, and these aren't necessarily bad things. Like it ended up okay, but I wish I had gone into it. I almost took a leap of faith. I liked what I saw of PT, but I saw such a limited window of physical therapy when I decided to just fully go into it. And now that I'm in it, I'm so grateful because I see that it's so much more broad. Like I was explaining, it's so much bigger than I thought it was. I think it could have been more exciting perhaps had I already known that to begin with, but it didn't turn out to be a bad thing. It ended up being a good thing. Something that I didn't know still was a positive, and not necessarily something that limited me in life that I didn't know that. But yeah, I wish more people knew that physical therapy was broader. But I guess if they're choosing to go into physical therapy, it won't make a difference. They'll be happily surprised. So that's a good thing. Totally. You can easily have a work-life balance. You can work as much as you want. There is going to be a job for you if you want to work very little or a lot. It can be a 40-hour-a-week job like anything else. It could be a 2-day-a-week job if that's what you want. So I work from 8 to 4:30. That's an 8-hour day for me. I personally only work 2 days a week. I went from 40 hours down to 2 days a week. That was a possibility for me. If I wanted to work every other week for a day, there is a company that would do that. I mean, a home health company. So that's why I say that PT is so flexible. You may not necessarily, and I do want to be clear, it's not like PT is like the greatest job ever. You can do whatever you want, anywhere you want. But I may not necessarily be able to still work in pediatrics, which I love. But if that work-life balance was more valuable to me, there would be a PT job for me to do that, and not necessarily one that I dislike. Um, that's another comfort in PT is that you're just not tied down. So that work-life balance is totally possible. You can, pick up a new job, just say something in my life happened where I could only work a couple days a month even. I know a place I could get a job to do that, like a home health company easily. I could go work at a skilled nursing facility and make that happen. So, like I said, it may not be your number one location, but there would be a job for you. So if time was the priority, or your ability to travel a lot or do other things, you could still be a PT and do that. If you just want to have a regular schedule, you can do that as well. It's very possible. It's a good job for anyone. If you like healthcare or you're interested in healthcare, but so far you haven't found something you like, look into PT, because I feel like a lot of people really like healthcare or the idea of working in healthcare, but they just can't see where they fit. PT is a great one because it does have the possibility of so many different locations. So you could work in a hospital, you could work outside of a hospital, you could even work in a school. So there's pediatric physical therapists who work in the school system and they follow a school schedule. They're like the teachers. They have summer break off, they have spring break, they have Thanksgiving break, they have them all. So I would say if you like the idea of healthcare, but you're like, I just don't know where I fit in it, PT might be a good one to look into. And the best advice I could have for you is go shadow, like go call up a clinic, say, you have to come back down to, it's kind of like that work-life balance again. What kind of lifestyle do you want? Okay, great. What areas of PT could work towards that? Let me just go watch. I feel like physical therapy is the type where I can describe it all day long and explain in huge detail everything that I'm doing, but until you see it in action, it's not going to click. And I almost guarantee if you take the time to shadow, you're going to see something amazing happen on your first day. I almost feel like I can 100% guarantee that, because something's always going to happen. It's incredible to see a real life patient session. And maybe it can be anything as significant as you could see a child take their first steps for the first time, or see a spinal cord injury patient stand up for the first time, and that's life changing in itself. But it can be as simple as you might see an older person who all of a sudden can finally reach that shelf, and now they don't have to rely on someone to get the cups out of the shelf for them if they want a drink of water, or maybe they can actually finally get their arm through a jacket or put on their pants by themselves. Those moments are incredibly emotional. I feel like if you're a PT, there's a chance you may get teary eyed very frequently because it's life changing. So I would say go and shadow and see if that's something that calls to you, because you will very likely see something amazing happen in every session, because something always does. Even the smallest thing is going to change something for everyone. Whether it's getting a few more degrees of knee motion, they will notice it as soon as they stand. Maybe that's all that happened that session. Like, oh, you got 10 more degrees in your knee movement. Then at the end of the session, they stand up and they start walking. They go, that feels better. Oh my goodness, that feels better. And you'll just feel that moment of, even though that was like the only win that whole session, it ends up being huge. So get out there and see it happen, and then see which little niche area of PT works for you. The world is truly your oyster. There are jobs for everyone. We need people in every sector. We need people to do every job. There are jobs that I would never want. And I'm so grateful that there are people who do them, because it helps all of us. It helps the whole community. If you think that, if healthcare might be it for you, then I invite you to look into all areas of healthcare, even beyond the major ones. If you're like, healthcare is totally not my thing, great. We need you. We need you to go out there and start finding where you fit in this world. No matter what job you have, you will very likely be improving someone's life, because at the end of the day, someone's going to benefit from the labors of your work. So I would just say, figure out what would be fulfilling. People always say you shouldn't make, your job your passion, or it should be a job you can live with. I mean, there's a whole bunch of advice on all of that. I think the most important thing for me is feeling like my job matters. And I think you can tell why my job matters to me, but I would hope that for the person who mixes, the ice cream flavors, that their job matters to them. Maybe that's really important to them. You don't want to wake up every day and feel like your job matters to no one. So find something that does matter to you. Doesn't matter if it's your passion, doesn't matter if it's like the greatest thing in the world. And then the other thing too is that just your work environment is going to be huge. So the people you work with, when you go out there and you start looking for your first jobs, try to find an environment you could live with, because yeah, your coworkers are going to be huge. You spend more time with them. Sometimes if you're working 40 hours a week, you're spending more time with them than you are your family. So that's going to be critical. So open mind. I think my path to PT was very much a scenic route, and I'm very grateful for the experiences that led me there. But it definitely could have been a missed opportunity if I hadn't decided to be open and see all the possibilities. So there's a job for everyone. You're doing a good job by being on this website and learning about all the different ones.